So people just by default walk on the street because in the face of uncertainty, you might as well walk on the street where the snow is not there and it's probably pretty much fine. So I think that that's the first aspect I would talk about. The second, I think, that's a big challenge, and I'm a data person, so you'll forgive me for being a data person. We don't have good data on how we could advocate, so I think there's a lot of people in the city who've been doing lots of advocacy and been doing an amazing job around storytelling, around pictures, around how we experience the city, and I think that's really, really important. But another piece of that puzzle for the advocacy is how we connect with data and how we understand the problem sort of at a higher scale. And I think we don't have good data both from the RNC, particularly from the RNC, but from lots of other places around how much of an extent of a problem is there, where are these things happening, how are these things happening, that can sort of be a second layer for the advocacy work that we've done. And until recently, I think another challenge that we have is the relationship between the city and the province. So I know that the city obviously knows, and this representative from the city is here, and I think it's been a conversation for a long time, but I haven't heard, I don't know if people have, all through Snowmageddon, all through what happened in December with the 7 pedestrian injuries and 1 death in December, much from the province about what's happening, what's going on, where that's happening. And that's really important because the city is sort of responsible for the roads, but in some ways the province is, and the province is paying all the healthcare costs. So the city doesn't pay the healthcare costs. The province is paying for all those people who go to the hospital and all of those things. So it's a hard problem in that way, I think, too.
Well, not great. Thank you. Thank you so much to each of our panelists for answering that first question. And so for this next one, I'm going to jump around a little bit. We're going to keep everyone on their toes. And so I'm going to pass the first one to Elizabeth. And the question here is, what is one solution that you would like to see implemented in working towards a more pedestrian-friendly St. John's, particularly in the winter?
Okay, so this is just one piece of the puzzle, but it's something I haven't heard talked about very much, so I thought it might be an interesting part of the discussion. And it is the idea of connecting all the beautiful trails that we have in the city. And some are just very short little walkways and historic passages and alleyways, and some are parts of the huge network of trails that are mostly sponsored by the Johnson Foundation. Anyway, called the. So what about connecting all these historic walkways, which, as others have talked about, would make getting around without a car so much more pleasant and even wonderful, to maybe a series of walking routes, connecting them to accessible sideways and intersections, to create routes that would go to major places of employment, to schools, and so on. So I'm just wondering about that possibility of grooming and clearing all those walkways.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'm sure Dan would agree on the health side of things, but maybe we can go to Dan for the next one in answering that one solution that you would like to see implemented.
So my one solution has nothing to do with sidewalks whatsoever. It is to change the level of service for roads, to transfer funds to pedestrian snow clearing. So as Elizabeth mentioned, I wrote down the numbers, 17 million for snow, approximately 1 million for sidewalks. So one of the reasons it's so expensive for us to do snow is because the level of service for snow plows is is bare pavement. Lots of other cities have a 5 centimeter, 10 centimeter rules where they don't plow until there's at least 5 centimeters of snow on the sidewalk. So I think that would actually give us the funds that we would need to pay for better pedestrian snow clearing if we had slightly worse road snow clearing. Obviously, some exceptions, like I don't want to be going up Barter's. I think Barter's Hill can still have bare pavement. That's fine, but if we're really going to get into the money of it, we need to find the money, and the money, in my opinion, should come from slightly, a little bit less snow clearing on the roads.
I'm going to pass this down the line to Anne. There you go. We're going to give you the final word, Ian.
Because my reality as a person who has severely impaired vision, I move through an environment that I cannot see. So nothing really becomes visible to me until I touch it, I hear it, or I smell it. So, speaking to intersections, you can imagine how challenging it is to get around St. John's just to get across streets when the only detection strategies you have are ears, touch, and smell. So that, I believe that when designers and engineers are designing the city and planning the city, they have to do it through that lens, the lens of people who are not experiencing the environment in that kind of very typical way. So because I experience the environment in that way, and because the disability that I have, generally, people's navigational tools are either a white cane or a dog, right? So a white cane will only work on a hard surface. So it won't work on a snowy sidewalk. And a guide dog, in order to be able to work, has to be able to detect a curb. Now that doesn't mean the dog has to see the curb, but the dog has to be able to kind of figure out where that curb is under whatever is on top of the curb. The other thing is that for me, like right now, I haven't really walked anywhere around St. John's since Christmas Eve because of this sidewalk situation, long before the big snowfall, right? Because the white cane won't work. And Cheryl, if I try to walk as you guys do, along the side of the road with the traffic, because of Cheryl's training, she's trying to pull me away from that traffic. So we're in a tug of war, right? So the gold standard for me and other people who live with this disability would be a sidewalk that is clear to the pavement, without that ridge along the edge, along the curb line, simply because I spend a lot of my time leaving my house and climbing into a vehicle this time of year. So tonight, my sidewalk was clear as he had the river of ice, but now I still have to get over this, 2 or 3 foot bank of icy crust to get down into a car. Like, it's a shit show. I'm not gonna call it anything else. But so that would be my gold standard. But I really think that sort of switching out how we look at things and look at it from the point of view of the most vulnerable to injury, right? What's this like if you're sitting lower down and using a wheelchair? Can you make eye contact with drivers? My least favorite phrase in the world. But I always say, well, that doesn't work for me. But I question whether or not it would work for somebody using a wheelchair either, who is seated, at a lower level than most of us have when we're standing. So my gold standard, folks, is down to the pavement and lay on the salt.
Thank you so much, Anne. And now, Ian Froude, to respond to the shit show. What is your one solution that you would like to see implemented?
I think it's straightforward. We have 161 kilometers of sidewalks that we attempt to clear. We need more staff and more equipment to do that clearing. It's as simple as that. We need more in addition to that, we need more for clearing pedestrian crossing points such as intersections, laneways, stairwells, and more. Like snow's going to fall, ice is going to form, but we have to have the resources in the field to stay on top of it. Having the appropriate resources, staff, and proper equipment, I believe it can be addressed. So the key question for me is what is that standard? And Anne makes extremely good points on what that should be. And believe it or not, the service standard that staff are aiming for is bare concrete on a sidewalk. We rarely reach that standard.
Thank you, Ian. So we're going to move into questions from the audience. I want to provide a quick reminder on this to keep your questions short and concise, and remember that a question ends with a question mark. And so who would like to start us off? what questions might you have? Is there a microphone? Yeah, I have a mic. Neri has the mic. Over here.
So, I guess I'll ask particularly Ian, but everybody is welcome to answer. So I grew up in Quebec City where it's never an issue, was never afraid of walking anywhere. And I was just checking their plan of snow clearing, and the sidewalk are as important as the road. And they don't use salt now, they use a mix of little rocks. What was the translation? Rock something.
Sand? Sand?
No, not sand. Rock, pierre, fondant. It was a fondant, not salt. Little rocks anyway. Small rocks. Anyway, it's little rocks, that's what it means.
Is it gravel?
It's a kind of gravel amalgamate. And I just wonder, and Quebec City is very similar, the old part, to here. So I was just wondering if how much attention the city has paid to places that are very similar to here, like Quebec City.
So about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a study done by KPMG, which is a consulting company, and it compared the comparable cities. So it looked at cities that were as similar to St. John's as you could apply. And then I traveled to Quebec City for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference last year, I believe it was, to get a better sense of the city, because I had never been there before. That study made some recommendations on ways we can change sidewalk snow clearing in the city. There are some distinctions between. It is remarkably similar. It's narrow roads, old city, it's up and down. One of the key differences is, it's not an excuse, but one of the key differences is the old city portion gets an incredible amount of funding via the federal government because it's a national historic site, or even maybe even above that. It gets an incredible amount of money for snow removal. So they have a source of funding that we don't have access to, which makes a big difference. Pardon? Oh, okay. The point I was making was that one of the reasons why Quebec City does so well on it is that they have an incredible base of resources they get via the federal government, because of the old city is maintenance of snow clearing in the old city portion is funded by the federal government because of its historic nature. We don't use sand or any aggregate type here. We use salt only, and the reason that has been the case is because historically the Public Works Department has not found salt or any aggregate to be effective at decreasing ice or making it not slippery anymore, based on their experience day to day and year to year. And I think I've sort of answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Ian. And thanks for that great question. And yeah, go ahead. Another one. Where's our mic? Mir is on it.
First of all, thanks to Three New Drinks for hosting this, Bannerman Brewing, and to the people on the panel. So I have a question, because this has been, I drive most of the time, I do walk. But I have a quick question for me to Councillor Froude. With regards to the 161 kilometers of sidewalk, is that counting the sidewalks on both sides of the street? Or so if you only counted, would it be about 90 odd or so kilometers of sidewalk on one side? That's the first question.
The 161 kilometers would include both sides. So I'll use an example, Duckworth Street. If there's a kilometer length of Duckworth Street and it's cleared on both sides, and that would be 2 kilometers of sidewalks cleared.
So here's a thought, and because I've watched pedestrians trying to negotiate traffic on Kenmont Road and places like this, is just a dead traffic, with children too. And I like the idea of sacrificing blacktop clearing on the roadway, because it will force people to slow down and give walkers the safety they need. Because I would assume that just about every walker is a citizen of St. John's and a taxpayer of St. John's, and most of the people who are using the roads are from outside of the city as well. So let's focus on the citizens first of all. But I'm thinking, at least on main thoroughfares, there's a certain, and I apologize for the preamble, but I would assume there's a priority of roads you have that get cleared. So I'm thinking, at least on the main thoroughfares like King Mount Road, is it not possible that on these roads, at the same time that they are cleared, that you clear down to the concrete at least one of the sidewalks on one side, so that there is a place to go, at least, rather than leave them there. You'll never get down to the concrete if you leave it there. It will freeze. So I'm just thinking there's a possibility. Let's start with the main thoroughfare. Where I live, no big deal. The road's barely cleared now. Sidewalks are not cleared. I can live with that. It's not a main thoroughfare. But I'm thinking on Cornwall Avenue, I don't see anything wrong with, let's clear at least one sidewalk for the way. I'm just wondering, from, not only from you, Councillor Froude, but from the rest of the people, about that idea. Let's start with that.
So can we clear one side on major thoroughfares?
So just one question really quickly. When you have the mic, you still have to speak kind of loud into it, and that goes for the speakers as well. Just because, it is a little noisy in here, so just yell, be obnoxious. That's what we all are, you know? Would you like this back? Make sure you have a question mark.
Just to be clear, can we apply the same priority? So clear the priority one sidewalks, at least one, and move from there. That's right, in the same progression that you clear roads.
Okay, thank you for that question. Ian, do you want to start us off with that?
I'll try. Good. I'll try and keep it up. So a couple of things. I'll try and be quick. The first thing is there's a priority system within both streets and how they're snow cleared and sidewalks and how they're snow cleared. A priority one sidewalk exists on a priority one street. I go back to the comment I made previously. We need greater resources on within sidewalk snow clearing to be able to get to the sidewalks on those key routes. One of the issues we have now within our existing prioritization is that there's 70 to 80% of that 161 kilometers is priority one. The remainder is priority 2 or 3. So even within the existing, it's not a extremely effective prioritization within it. So it means we're not even getting through priority 1. Secondly, we looked at summer of last year, looked at peeling off some routes as to see if there were areas where there weren't sidewalk, it wasn't necessary to do both sides of the street, and we determined at that time that we couldn't take any off because of interconnection points, because if you clear one side, then how am I effectively going to get from the intersection to another side? So it wasn't going to work well. And that around that time as well, we put more resources into clearing. I want to respond to the road snow clearing idea of pulling more money from the road snow clearing budget and putting it into sidewalk clearing. I don't believe that is possible. And the reason I don't believe it's possible is because of the possible to divert. I believe there's coordination. There's effective coordination that we need to do more of between the two crews. But reducing the amount of investment and crews and people on clearing our roads, there's two key issues with that. One, we have a winter that is, tonight's a perfect example of it. We get snow in the middle of the day or yesterday or the day before, and then it rains, and then it freezes overnight. So if we were to run a plow down a street that has that on it, the plow would get incredibly damaged, and we'd have to spend a fortune on equipment maintenance. And so it's more effective to stay on top of it. Second, the second is flooding. So we have a lot of freeze thaws, and look at prairie cities. Prairie cities do snow clearing. They leave a lot of snowpack on the road. But they don't have a freeze thaw cycle as intense as we do. So when that water melts, when that snow melts, and the incredible amounts that it does sit around our city, that water has to go somewhere, and the catch basins have to be open so that water can run into the catch basins.
I'm going to ask you to finish up, Ian, if you don't mind.
Otherwise, we could have severe flooding, and we saw some of that last winter. So anyway, that's two of the challenges here.
Thanks for that response, Ian. I know there's a couple other questions, so I'm going to keep it moving.
Jen,
Yeah.
are we collecting the surveys?
Yeah, Sheridan's going to collect those, so he'll
Wicked.
be wandering around and grabbing those. Thank you.
Because some people are asking for them. Okay, hands up. All right, we have not. How about you?
I guess this is directed to you, but I guess welcome to the panel as well. This is somewhat naive, but I'm interested to hear what the possibility is, I guess what the perception of the possibility is for everyone who's not on council of getting to 100% of the sidewalks cleared. Because I understand that the 161 is somewhat good now from the council's point of view, but if that is in fact, I guess, 80 kilometers of road, what is the possibility of getting to 100% of that 2,000 plus kilometers of sidewalk that you said we have?
Can I actually ask if Elizabeth, do you want to jump in on this one from some of your research? Yeah, they're right there. And then we'll get Ian on it.
I feel slightly awkward answering because I don't want to look as though I'm aiming criticism at Ian directly, though there is.
You're allowed.
I do have some criticism for the city because that 161 kilometers, I believe, recommends about 23% of all the sidewalks in the city, according to my calculations. The comparison cities in the study that Ian referred to, 4 of the 5 clear all of their sidewalks, or virtually all of their sidewalks, which is what you're asking if we could do. And the 5th one clears 62%. So we're so far behind what any of the comparison cities, and while St. John's does, as Ian explained, have very particular problems and challenges, and I was interested in your explanation about why Quebec City can do better too. But nevertheless, there's a huge discrepancy between the sheer percentage of sidewalks that we do and what any of the comparison cities, which were chosen because they did have some things in common with St. John's. I mean, they weren't prairie cities. So I'm curious about that too. And I would like to see all the sidewalks done. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll pass it over to you. Yeah.
For people who do not, for whatever reason, drive a car or own a car, I find that very small kilometerage of cleared sidewalks very limiting. For example, I have moved 8 times since 2008, trying to find the neighborhood in St. John's where I can walk relatively safely most of the time from my house to a supermarket. I live right now 1,000 meters from a supermarket I can't get to right now and haven't been able to since Christmas. So, unless we want to have a city where ghettos form around those rare neighborhoods that are walkable, because people who may have mobility challenges will seek out the places that are most accessible. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have even a single neighborhood that you can safely assume you're going to be able to walk around or wheel around most of the time. No one's asking for miracles, The other thing I would like to say is, for somebody like me who can't see, consistency is everything. I have frequently walked down a paved sidewalk that ends, for no apparent reason. It's like, beautiful path, beautiful path, beautiful path. Oh, okay, now it's stopped, and I still have the rest of the block to walk down. And then you find yourself kind of tacking back and forth, as this gentleman earlier talked about, watching pedestrians tack back and forth across the road, trying to find their way to their destination. So I think whatever area, square footage or square mileage we can clear, it has to be consistent, and we have to know, have reasonable, consistent estimates of how long is it going to take for this area to be plowed. Is it going to be 24 hours? Is it going to be 48 hours? But right now, I live in the great unknown. It's kind of like you're sitting in your house going, well, maybe by next week. Maybe by next week. So even little things like that about keeping people informed as to what the truth is about when that thing actually is going to get plowed. At least you can organize your life around that cruel reality.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. And yeah, okay, we'll pass things over to Elizabeth for a quick comment and then back to Ian.
Just a quick comment, because I said that while my comment wasn't addressed to Ian, it was addressed to the city, but really when I thought about it, I want to go back to what I said earlier about attitudes, that it isn't, I mean, the city is an entity, but the people who make the decisions are councillors. Some of them are very, very supportive, others not so much, and it's partly because they're not aware, because they don't hear from the people in their wards. So, yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that I still think it comes back to attitudes of the whole community. So there's a very important education piece and lobbying piece, various pieces to do with attitudes.
And so much of it is the pressure that we put on our elected politicians to make change too, right?
Yeah.
From all over the city. So I'm going to pass it over to Ian and then we're going to move on.
All right, I'll try and be quick. So the 161 is not necessarily 80 kilometers of road, because a bunch of those, only one side is cleared. So just to clarify that. I would prefer as our first step to get, as Anne mentioned, reliable, timely coverage and clearing on and ice control on the 161 kilometers. Those 161 kilometers, with some minor adjustments, maybe there could be a 10 to 15% addition to that, to make sure interconnection points are made in particular neighborhoods. Those 161 kilometers are primarily in areas where you already have a heightened level of pedestrian activity in the center of so Ward 4 and Ward 2, University and the downtown areas have a large percentage of the sidewalks no clearing because they have pedestrian destinations to them. I would want us to get that done first and reliable, so that people can depend on it and know that it's cleared. As to the question of doing more than that, or much more than that, over the next couple of months, as I mentioned earlier, public works staff are putting together options for what advancement of this might cost, and the how to do it. So there will be some real tangible things that we can sink our teeth into.
Thanks, Ian, and to Anne and Elizabeth as well. I'm going to keep things moving. Does anyone have any other questions? There's one in the back.
Well, actually, we are always in the co-op looking for people to help out with these things. And one of the reasons you can do that is because you can carry the mic, which means you get to ask your own question. So, my question to you is, so yeah, volunteer with the co-op, it's a lot of fun. And you get one of the cute little COD buttons, which is also really fun. My question is for all of you, I guess. Ian, you kind of alluded to there being it being like it's an intersectional issue, right? Like there's so many reasons that you would want sidewalk clearing. I mean, there's the basic rights approach. There are people in our city who literally can't move around for most of the year, and that's a rights problem. But you talked a little bit about how there are these interconnected benefits, right? There's the economic benefits, there's the health benefits. And I think that a lot of people in the panel could maybe just speak to like, what are those? What are those bigger things that we could maybe hope for with more sidewalk clearing?
Good recruitment strategy, Marianne. Very smart. I'm going to start us off with Dan, if that's okay. Yeah, on those intersectional, some of the health-based aspects.
I guess I'm supposed to talk about health right now. I mean, I think one of the challenges, I alluded to it in my comment, I think one of the challenges is who is paying is not, we don't really account for it well, and it doesn't make much sense. So the province has a health and all policies guideline, or the way forward includes health and all policies. There's no conversation about roads or streets or sort of transportation behaviors in any of those conversations. So again, I think the province needs to step up and think about how these things are relating to health and how they're paying for it, and how maybe the city can contribute to that. I think that's really, really important. The other thing that people probably know is Newfoundland wins at everything in terms of having the worst diabetes and heart disease, and you name it, we have it. We win in terms of the provinces. And the healthcare costs of that are astoundingly high. We already have the highest healthcare costs of any province by far, by over $1,000 per person. So on average, it's about $6,000 per person that provinces pay and we pay about $7,500 per person for healthcare costs. So we need to think about how those costs are coming in and how they're being accounted for. At the end of the day, though, I really think this is an equity issue and a social justice issue. I mean, that's why we're here. And the health costs are hard, and it's hard to calculate, and it's a lot of math, and it's complicated. And I think the social justice argument is just like, actually, we just need to do this because it's fair and people need to get around.
I'm going to get Elizabeth's quick comment on this, and then we'll keep it going because I know there's a few more questions. Go ahead.
I totally agree with everything Dan said, and I'll just add that it's also about happiness and about sense of community, so a happy city, right? There is research that shows that people are also happier when they are using active transit, and indeed public transit, which is a bit surprising, but they are. And we saw a little bit of that, I think, in the first 3 days after the blizzard, when, depending where you live, but in many neighborhoods, people were walking around. There wasn't any traffic, but there were many people out on snowshoes, on skis, whatever way they could get around, talking to each other, enjoying each other's company, enjoying their neighborhoods. So it's happiness as well as health and equity and social justice. So it's all those. And Ian also mentioned climate change, which transportation is a very big percentage. Depends how you calculate it, but it's always a big percentage of contributors to CO2 emissions as well. So.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, absolutely. I think it brings it back to the entire theme of green new drinks in general, right? It's all about thinking about how we're addressing climate change. So I think we have a question
from
over
the
here.
Live stream.
Yeah.
Wow, very 2020.
Hello, I'm going to read this question. It's from someone named Shirley who couldn't be here. Hello, I'm not able to attend the panel, but I just want to point out something. Danny Breen said the storm would cost about $5 million, but that it wouldn't be any problem to find that money in a $300 million city budget. If that is the case, they don't need to raise taxes for additional sidewalk clearing. They can easily find the money within the current budget. Just wanted to get some comments on that remark. Question mark at the end implied.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I'm going to pass this one over to Ian. Sorry, Ian.
Shirley.
Ian is ferociously writing, capturing those thoughts.
That is not an easy one. I'm not going to directly comment on the mayor's comment.
Seems wise.
There's a factor in there that, so Shirley makes a good point. There are resources there's money there and it's being spent on what is prioritized. If that prioritization needs to change, then the public needs to let council know that prioritization needs to change. That's one point. The second point is that there are sometimes unpredictable surpluses or deficits, for that matter. So as tax, this is incredibly and nerdy, but as the tax roll changes, as more houses or apartments or businesses are built, the amount of taxes that come in increases or decreases if buildings are shut down or whatever the matter may be. So sometimes that happens quicker than you budget for. So you budget for what you anticipate is going to be built in 2020 or 2019. And then sometimes that happens quicker, so there is additional money that is then available at the end of the year. Often, because that is unpredictable, you don't budget to spend it, and it's usually used to put down on debt, so that your debt costs go down, which gives you a little bit more wiggle room in the budget. So I think that sort of answers. Okay.
Thanks, Ian, for fielding that difficult but important question. I'm going to try to get 3 more questions in. So I see some hands. And
okay, sorry guys, there's a lot of questions. I'm not so sorry if we don't get to you, but who has had their hand up for a while? Kurt.
It's a difficult job. Thanks, Maria.
Hi. Any thoughts on, okay, so.
Can you speak up, Kirsten?
Sure. It's against the law for drivers to fail to yield to pedestrians. People who are walking on the road when the sidewalks are impassable are allowed to do that as long as they're going against traffic.
Okay, I'll give it to you.
Now, I wonder if, do you see any role in, for the RNC or law enforcement generally in terms of making sure these obligations of drivers toward pedestrians are more widely respected?
No, it's fine. Just I don't like people
Okay,
telling me
great.
what to do.
Role for the RNC or law
It's okay.
enforcement or law enforcement in ensuring that roads are safe for pedestrians.
Well, yeah, and in terms of making sure that drivers are
Drivers.
aware that they have to slow down and yield to pedestrians in a whole lot of circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to start us off with this one? Dan, let me get it down here. Perfect.
Can I just say I don't think that's going to work. So we're not going to. I don't think the RNC is going to enforce their way out of this problem. I mean, most people know that. I mean, who here walked here and had a light or a high-vis vest or some kind of thing that showed that they were there, and who walked against traffic? Lots of people. Like, most people know that, and I think most people do that. So I think that that's a hard problem for the RNC to enforce. I would say, so what I would say related to that is, there's a thing that we could do that might help everyone be safer, which would be to lower speed limits, and I know that's provincial. And a speed limit change is partly it's a law, so partly it's enforceable by the RNC, and partly a law is sort of an agreement between people to say, like, I'm not going to break this law that we've enforced, right? So, you know, people break speed limits, but they can be enforced. So I think that, to me, that's a much more effective intervention than, you know, doing more education by the RNC or enforcement by the RNC around pedestrian safety, because everyone's going to be safer. The pedestrians are going to be safer, and the vehicles are going to be safer. So if you're hit by a car at 30 kilometers an hour, 1 in 10 pedestrians will have a serious injury or fatal injury. If you're hit by a car at 40 kilometers an hour, 4 in 10 will have a serious or fatal injury. 50 kilometers an hour, 8 in 10 or 7 in 10, and it just keeps going up from there. So there's a real benefit from going from any speed to 30. So I'm a strong advocate for that as our sort of number one intervention that we need to do, because I could do everything right. I could be lit up like a Christmas tree. I could be doing what I need to do, and still, you know, I slip, or someone doesn't pay attention, or something happens. So I think that that's the more effective intervention. Kristen, it looks like I didn't answer your question well.
Sorry, just to be clear, I'm not saying that the police should be telling pedestrians what to wear. Like, for one thing, that's not the law at all. Like, pedestrians don't have to be wearing safety gear. But I think that, like, drivers fail to yield to pedestrians. Like, so just to clarify, it sounded to me like you were responding to, like, as if I were criticizing pedestrians, but I was not.
Yeah, so I think for me the fail to yield is more, if you're going slower, it's easier to yield. So it just helps with everything. It helps with yielding. It helps with if you get in a crash, you hit somebody. It kind of is a general thing that helps going slower, right? So to me, that's the number one benefit.
Thank you for the question and the response. I'm going to try to get 2 more in. Nuria?
And really quickly, Leah just reminded me, there's actually going to be a town hall on pedestrian safety on what date, Leah? March 15th at the Lantern from 2 to 4:30. So keep all your burning questions and ask them again. Okay, Oscar, you've had your hand up forever.
Just letting you know, this is more directed at the city, but since you're here, it's coming at you. In the past, the city has spent, 6 figures on consultations and done nothing with the results. How can we expect anything to come from the consultations coming this spring? And can we do anything to actually cause action to happen?
Actions from consultations. Okay. Ian, I'm sorry. You're doing a great job.
So I cannot speak to the decisions of previous councils based on the consultations or the public consultations or the consultants they hired and what they chose to do or not do with that information and that input. I will say a couple of things. I believe we've done public engagement now on public engagement or hired consultants on some really key issues. I believe that we made some important changes as a result of the budget 2019 consultations. There were real adjustments in there based on feedback from the public. And secondly, one of the pieces of the hiring of consultants that I've been most directly connected with is the public transit review. And I made clear that it wasn't going to sit on a shelf, it wasn't just going to be advice. And we have followed through on a very large number of the ideas and commitments and changes in that, including the income assistance pass that we announced on Monday, so that anyone on income assistance gets a free public transit pass. We have invested in the frequent transit network for public transit. So my point being is the problems that I feel I've had a grasp on, we have dug in and made important changes.
Thanks, Ian, for that. And thanks for the question. And I think our last one over here, final word, no pressure.
The final word.
I don't think I've ever used a microphone before.
Closer, can you put it closer?
Yeah. So it's come up in the discussions a fair few times that there are wards that are not getting this feedback from their residents, or councillors who aren't getting this feedback from their residents because their residents largely drive. Certainly the crowd here is a sample, but you're probably not hearing from a lot of people who are less engaged in politics potentially. And there's a huge low-income population in the city. Students, whether they realize it or not, are also low income. And I worry that the voice is not going to be as loud as it needs to be to convince your colleagues that might be sitting on the fence that this is an important issue. I guess, yeah. Do you think that the voice is loud enough that the people who think that car is king and pedestrians can eat it is going to be loud enough to make a change? Is that message getting through?
Okay, thank you. And
Before you start, actually, I don't know, did everyone hear her? Yeah. So what basically the question was is that there's lots of, and I've heard this as well, I'm glad you asked this. Different councillors have been getting different kinds of feedback. I mean, this sample is probably not representative of St. John's as a whole. We're all very pedestrian friendly. It's a very friendly room. But yeah, so I think what you were asking was just kind of how has that feedback, can you speak a little bit to that? Has the feedback been, have you gotten enough feedback saying that we need better sidewalks to act on that? And yeah, just the kind of point being that some wards are not as strong on asking for sidewalk clearing because mostly they drive. And so yeah, is that a fair representation of your question?
Yeah, just
okay.
Yeah, there are going to be people involved, or people who need to walk and have no other option that may not be engaged in the political process to the same extent.
Low-income people.
Okay. Yeah. So also, it is a kind of rights thing. So there are going to be people who can't engage in this process, but who are probably the people who need that the most.
Thank you for both of you for that question, the reframing. From an advocacy standpoint, from some of the work that's already been done in the community, do you want to speak to this, Elizabeth, Ann, or Dan, before we throw it to Ian? In terms of what you've heard. Yeah, we'll throw it over to Ann.
Something that I mentioned to another of the protesters on Monday was the sad irony about the demonstrations that have taken place over the years is that, again, speaking from a disability point of view, the people who most want and probably need to be there can't get there. And I realized on Monday morning when I thought it through, for example, if your means of transportation around the city is paratransit, our paratransit system right now is like full to capacity. It's busting at the seams. So what if 50 people from the paratransit using community all wanted to be in the same place at the same time at rush hour on Monday? I don't think the system could even meet that demand. right? A barrier, barrier, barrier. So there are additional barriers to engagement. It's like one thing leads to another. The sidewalks are so much more than just sidewalks. And I think all of us, I know we pedestrians do, as a matter of course, think this way. But I think perhaps governmentally, when we think of transportation systems, we think of railways, highways, airways, and waterways. But really, sidewalks are a transportation system. And and they needed to be maintained with the same vigor and consistency and, you know, sort of energetic attention as do any other transportation systems.
Thank you, Anne. All right, Ian, final word on this, and then we're going to wrap it up for the evening.
Okay. On what we hear and what we don't hear, I hear a lot from pedestrian advocates, people who are pedestrians and want to move around the city safely. And it's extreme. It's disappointing that we've not created a system where they can. I hear it daily, and I spoke to it in the chamber on Monday after the protest about the diversity of people that I hear it from. Second thing I wanted to say was, I think we need to get our as in people who want to improve sidewalk snow clearing, our asks clear, so that everyone around the table, staff, council, and beyond, know exactly what we're striving for. Thirdly, we hear the opposite as well. So, and what I mean by that is, I hear from people that we already spend enough on sidewalk snow clearing. I disagree with that, but I hear it as well, and my colleagues hear it. I hear just strap on your crampons and move on. I disagree with it, but I hear it. My colleagues hear it. I believe it's our responsibility as elected officials to two things: to go above sometimes what we hear, and to ensure we're hearing the people we're not hearing. So, and I think if we're able to do that, we have to do that, and we need to act upon it. We need to recognize that there are voices that are not being heard, and there are real barriers preventing that from happening. And we need to act in a way that reduces those barriers, and those barriers: participation in community, participation in the economy, participation in life.
Thank you, Ian. So in terms of keeping that conversation going and ensuring that our politicians are aware of what the issues are across the city, you folks, there's surveys on some of the tables. If you don't have a survey, perhaps you could put up your hand and we'll, Sheridan has them back there. So that's a way for us to kind of tabulate what are some of the things that we're hearing and report it back to the fine folks at council. I also want to remind folks that there's a neighborhood summit happening this weekend, which is all about how we organize at a neighborhood level, how we make our voices heard, and that's happening from 9:30 to 2:30 at the Newfoundland and Labrador Housing and Homelessness Network. You can register. It's $25 suggested donation, pay what you can at happycity.ca, so I'd love to see some of you folks there. And before I hand it back to Leah, I just want to really honestly thank each and every one of you for being here this evening, for fielding some difficult questions, and for sharing your thoughts on this tangly issue. So thank you.
I'll pass things back over to Leah.
Thank you, Jen. Oh, that's not on.
Where is the location of the neighborhood summit? I mean, you know what building it is, but where is the building?
Jen?
Do you need, is that?
Charter Street? Hello. Thank you to our panel for your labor and your efforts, and to Jen for your moderating skills. Very well done. Thank you to Mark Naples' daughter, whose name I sadly have not been told yet, for for this beautiful cake.
Guys, look at it.
Look
It
at
looks
this
like
cake.
the earth. Yeah.
Has everyone gotten their cake raffle ticket?
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Not very many people did, so you have a really good chance of winning.
You have a very good chance of winning. Tickets are $2 or 3 for $5. You can take home this beautiful cake with the earth, which we are trying to save, on the top.
The actual cake bit is chocolate and the earth is vanilla, so no excuses if you don't like either of those.
I like it. I also wanted to recognize that there are a lot of questions we couldn't get to, which is both unfortunate but also like really awesome. And we want to make sure those questions don't go unanswered. So sign up on the email sheet down at the table for more information about future actions and our town hall. The town hall is going to be on March 15th at the Lantern from 2 to 4:30. Hopefully we'll see some more folks there then with those burning questions that we sadly couldn't get to this evening.
Could you just recap the location of it? Yeah, and I'll just jump in and just raise that the neighborhood summit this weekend is happening at 77 Charter Avenue, which is on a bus route. And we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. It's wheelchair accessible. It's pay what you can. So again, even if you could just join us for a part of the day, we'd love to see you there.
And also,
I just turned it on.
And don't forget to sign the climate petition if you haven't already gotten your name on that list. It's a very important one, especially if we want to be able to hold provincial government accountable for things like funding and partnership with municipalities to mitigate these issues.